my mind about things I want to discuss, but I think today I want to address the nature of reality, because the whole point of this ascension journey is to move from the 3D, the physical, which is base consciousness or satanic consciousness if you prefer, 666, to higher consciousness, Christ consciousness, love consciousness, heart consciousness. A lot of people are stuck in the base consciousness, which is the duality layer. The first perception is that everything's honky-dory, even though we live in this 911 trauma center and there's a bunch of like traumatic, dramatic events everywhere. Why is the world like this? And then when you realize why the world is like this, you automatically go to the other side, which is the fear conspiracy mindset, with the ruling elite being evil. Most people don't move past this point. Most people get stuck in the fear, conspiracy, ruling elite perception. This entire world we live in is about perception. Going from base consciousness or 3D to 5D or Christ consciousness is all about changing your perception. And a lot of people have a hard time with that, because typically, like when you're in the 3D, you are looking at the 3D and you're saying, well, that's what it is, and that's what it always will be. And if you don't see things from my perspective, then you're stupid. You know, the basic understanding of what life is all about. Go to work, get paid, buy a house, get a family, die. And that there's nothing beyond that. And then on the flip side, the mentality is still the same. Can't you see that we're run by a bunch of evil people? And can't you see that we're in part of a pyramid and that we are slaves? You know, that sort of thing. And I shared in my last video excerpts of me in that mindset. And I shared it because I wanted to show you where I used to be and where I am now. And that was the 2017, 2018, 2019 phase. So come 2020, or spring, summer 2020, I changed my mindset and I got out of the fear, because I merged those polarities. It's the black and white, the red and the blue, the police. So your goal is to get past that perception. Now, if you want to stay there, you're welcome to stay there if it serves you and your needs to stay in the fear camp, because obviously if you're watching this kind of content, you are not in the ignorant camp, you're in the fear camp. If you're in that zone, you have somebody outside of you to blame. You need the evil elite to exist in order to project all of the bad things onto them and blame them for it. And if you're in a 3D mindset and believing that the 3D is outside of you, then that's going to satisfy you and that's all you're going to see, and you likely won't move past that point. I've talked about the fact that evil is just a perception. So it doesn't actually exist in the sense that there is something you can point at and say that's evil, because everything is dual. So if everything is dual, then the opposite also exists within it. So there is no pure evil. So if there's no pure evil, there is no pure good. Everything comes from God. God is in everything. God is everything. And if God is good, then everything is good. A lot of the things that we carry in terms of assumptions and presumptions and perceptions need to change. And that's what inner work is changing those perceptions so that you can rise in consciousness and go from base consciousness and understanding that the 3D is something that's outside of you and has control over you. It controls your moods, it controls how you feel, it controls what you do, and you react to it. And then rising to Christ consciousness, where you are the one who is consciously creating your experience and manifesting things the way that you want them to be. And you're not reacting to things externally. You understand what it is that they're saying to you because they are an extension of you. So moving away from this duality perception is simply realizing that they are one, realizing that they are two halves of the same coin. And as I said in the last video, when you are of the perception that there's an us versus them or an enemy outside of yourself or what have you, it's kind of difficult to align that, to merge the two, because you need to believe that that out there is separate from you, because that's bad, I'm not. But there's a lot to be understood in why those things are being created. Those things are being created out of fear. We are living in a state of perpetual fear, and so those things are manifesting outside of us with all of this fear. And so you have things like wars and controllers and all of these people doing bad things and toxic things, and that all comes from fear. So when you move out of fear, and the only way to change the reality out there is by changing yourself, because that's all there is. So when you change your perception of self and you change your perception of others, those things change. And from a 3D perspective, that's hard to understand. So you have to practice in order to see that that is true. It just doesn't make any sense to believe that everything is love and then have an enemy outside of yourself. So the way to look at this perceived enemy or any bad thing that happens to you, you're the one who makes it bad or good. So you have the power to choose how you describe that thing that happens to you. So you don't need to look at something that's painful or awful, it hurts, as and try to make yourself believe that it's good. It's not what I'm talking about. Look at how you label something and see if there's another way to look at it, because there's an infinite number of ways to look at something. So for example, I recently looked back in my past and I looked at a former friend who I had like previously believed that this friend was really a good friend. Then I had noticed a lot of not so good behaviors and didn't really want to be friends with this person anymore. So then I recently looked back on that and understood better why that behavior was necessary in my story. And so even though the behavior itself was not good and the results were not good, it was necessary for my journey and my story and the unfolding of it. And so in that sense, I can now look at it as beneficial and I can be grateful for the experience. So that's what I'm talking about, is that the things that we perceive to be bad or evil or whatnot, we perceive them that way because they hurt. We perceive them that way because we're looking at these people suffering and we're making judgments on them when we're saying, well, that is evil and that is bad. And yeah, I'm not trying to excuse their behavior or anything, but it's generated out of necessity. So it serves a purpose. A lot of times when you talk about like trying to merge the duality, that's the go-to. The go-to is, yeah, but what about all of these horrible things that happen to all of these people that I don't know, all of these people that I'll never know, and I've never seen it myself, I've only seen it on TV. Why are you concerning yourself with people you don't know and never will know? Concern yourself with your own life and your own story, because really that's the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters is yourself and your own story. I know that sounds selfish to people in the 3D mindset, but the ultimate truth is you are the center of your universe and you are the only thing that matters. How you feel, how you think, your concept of self and your concept of other people. Yeah, it sounds selfish, but there's nothing wrong with selfish in the sense that you are taking care of yourself, rather than selfish in the sense that you're taking from other people for your own selfish, self-serving needs or selfish benefits. The elite are put in place on purpose. We put them there. We created them. We put them there. Every level of perception is valid. So if you are in the ignorant perception, that's valid. If you are in the conspiracy perception, that's valid. Every perception is valid. But what kind of perception do you want? Do you want to perpetuate the belief that you live in a prison? The only prison you live in is self-created. So if you want to perpetuate that belief because it makes you feel safe, ironically, because when you're in that sort of victim mindset, which is what it is, because you believe that there are people ruling you and people who are above you and you're helpless and you're being controlled and manipulated and poisoned and whatnot, then you're helpless and you're waiting for someone to save you, and you have no faith in yourself, and you have no faith that you can get out, because you can't. In that mindset, you can't. But all you want is to get out. So the irony is, once you realize the truth of this place, who you really are, and the true nature of this place, that everything is love, you don't want to leave, because then life becomes magical. But because you get to that point in Christ consciousness and realizing that all is love, and you are in that state, then you have left. This story that we live in is pure perfection. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with any of it. When you're in conspiracy mindset, you think everything's wrong. This whole world is wrong. It's upside down. It's awful. It's terrible. I mean, yes, it is upside down, but it isn't awful and terrible. I mean, you can have that perception from time to time. It can get to be a bit of a pain in the butt, and you have bad days and such, but that's part of the process. So the whole purpose for the world and the existence of this place is that it is a story, and then the story is about the separation and reunification of the divine feminine from the divine masculine. So how I see reality is like we're in a TV screen. We have our thoughts and everything that we are is reflected outside of us. So what we think and perceive and believe about ourselves and about the world is reflected outside of us. And so when that changes, the world changes, because it's just a reflection of that. So when you are, if you look at, say, a TV screen and it's black when it's turned off, so it's nothing, no thing, that would be source. Source is no thing. And then when you turn it on, it's let there be light. And when you turn it on, it creates everything, every single TV show, every single thing that's on the internet, if your television's hooked up to the internet, is all within there. You can pull up anything from the television, any TV show, anything you want, pull it up and have it on your screen. But you can only view that one thing at a time. You can't watch 10 TV shows at the same time. In that sense, that's how life is. You are pulling into your experience things that you want to experience. So you decide that you want to turn left instead of right. You decide that you want to date somebody over somebody else, or you decide that you want to go to a certain college, and you decide you want a certain career. And so those are the pathways that you choose. The reason why there's this belief that we're inside a matrix system is because that is coming from the base consciousness, or the left brain, the masculine side. It's not incorporating the feminine side, which is consciousness. So a lot of people will default to the computer system or the computer idea because they can't fathom the consciousness idea. The computer idea is something they can tangibly look at, and it makes sense to them. All of the things in this reality are like the websites. They're not actually there. They don't actually exist. It's just like it's just an experience that you can have. They're just numbers and code. So everything here is an expression of code. Essentially, your goal is to change your perception. to leave behind this perception of separateness in 3D and rise to the level of perception where you see everything is connected and not as it appears, in that everything is one, everything is an extension of you. Some people get there faster than others because they have less resistance. If you're a very left brain person and you require evidence and logic and you are closed off to the feminine side of intuition and imagination and creativity, and you're not meditating, that might be harder for you. If you are open to that, test it out. Like I said, test out what it looks like to view the world through different eyes, to have a different perception. Play around with it. If it's too hard for you to leap to seeing the world through the eyes of everything is one and everything is love, and marrying the two, the opposites, and seeing that they're actually one, if that's too difficult for you, then try something else. Just look at things from a different point of view. I'm hoping this isn't too repetitive from yesterday's talk, because I had mentioned quite a few of the points that I've discussed here, but there's a lot of crossover. I think the reason I wanted to talk about it was because I know this is a very difficult perception to overcome, and I think it's helpful to know where you're going to, where you're headed to. I mean, I can look at certain events from a variety of perspectives and see how varied every single experience can be, which is why we have a lot of different people, because one person tends to view things from a very consistent point of view, which is your belief system. And when that shifts, then you can see things from a different point of view. So if you are able to pull back even further and see things from a variety of points of view all at once, you can see that you have the option available to you to choose how you perceive something. And that frees you up in the sense that I don't have to choose to believe that when this happens, that's bad, or when this happens, it means this. And I can choose to say that happened and it doesn't mean anything. That happened, and normally I make it mean that this isn't going to work out. But now I can look at it and say, well, it's possible that all that means is this instead. And it doesn't mean that it isn't going to work out. It means that it's opening up the pathway to receiving the thing that I want. And that's really how you should start to view things optimally, is to see that these so-called bad things are actually helping to pave the way to the thing that you want, the thing that you've called into your experience. I mentioned the other day that when you live in fear for so long, love feels like pain. What I meant by that was that the love is so intense that it hurts in a good way. Not that it causes heartbreak and pain and loss and everything. That comes from fear. That comes from fear of loving. I'm talking about when you finally start to receive the love that you thought you knew existed and you had been denied it for so long. That love feels painful because it is so good. You're not used to it. So getting used to it is going to take some adjustment because it's so intense. And this is like, perhaps this is a discussion for another day, but this is like when you go through the ascension process and you start to receive what some people call downloads, receive information or messages about the truth. And that truth can be painful. It can be painful in a negative way. It can be painful in a positive way. There's been a few times where I've had this type of experience, this type of pain. Pain from truth, pain from love. And Enki's love letter was a revelation that I had when I was watching Free Guy. And so Free Guy, the love letter is the realization to Millie from Guy saying that he's just a love letter to her and that someone up there is the author, who was Keys. And so Keys represents Enki. He wrote the code, and the code is the zodiac, which is the story. And so he also wrote it with her. So this love story was written together, but because she is in the story, she is in the simulation with Guy, she forgot. She forgot the story, she forgot who she is, she was playing a different character, and she forgot who she really is. And she's getting lost in this simulated world. And so Guy is there to remind her. And Keys is on the other side. His love letter to her is there to remind her of who she really is, so she can return home to him. The realization of that and seeing that and how beautiful it is and how powerful it is, because that's what is going on here, was so painful. And it was painful in a way that a lot of these revelations that I have are painful, and maybe it's not as painful to other people. But to me, it's painful in remembering that that's my story. That's part of my story. And so the recognition of that and having that come up, it's so buried and forgotten that the rising of it is painful. And it's almost like it's like ripping my soul out. But I know it sounds really painful, and it was painful, and it's happened a few times, but it's painful because what it's doing is it's taking away the denial. It's taking away all of the negative fear stuff that has buried it. Because in recognizing that that's the truth, and then that's the love story, and it's rising up to come to the surface to say, yeah, this is true. All of the stuff that's been holding it down has to come up, and it's that stuff that's making it painful. It's this overturning of the ship. It's the overturning of all of the fear and the blockages and the suppression that we've given ourselves to believe this fear-based reality in which we live.